everyone, good afternoon. I'm Shreya Dhoundial. This is your afternoon dispatch, and these are the big headlines we are tracking at 1 today. The U.S. Maritime strategy in the Gulf has been scaled back. Is this a U-turn? You can decide. Instead of a Hormuz blockade, the focus has now shifted to restricting Iranian port-linked shipping, with the strait itself remaining open. Meanwhile, oil prices have surged after the U.S. announced the blockade operations, with Brent crude crossing the $100 mark. Markets have reacted sharply amidst fears of supply disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's parliament speaker, Ghalibaf, has mocked America's blockade plan, warning Americans could soon be facing higher fuel prices. He is predicting that petrol may rise to $4 to $5 per gallon. Meanwhile, in Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces have said its troops have dismantled a Hezbollah underground tunnel network in southern Lebanon. The tunnels were reportedly used for planning and facilitating attacks against Israeli forces as tensions continue along the northern front. This is the big breaking news that we are tracking this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have saner voices finally prevailed in the United States? Well, a day after President Trump threatened to blockade the entire Strait of Hormuz, there is now a clear scaling back. Now the U.S. Central Command is saying there will be a blockade on ships that are entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas. This blockade, the Americans say, will begin at 7:30 p.m. India time. The U.S. is saying their forces will not impede vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz, which is a clear step back from President Trump's earlier vow. Let me go straight across to... All right, we'll go across to Srinjoy, who will be joining us on the broadcast. Sagarika also joining us on the Twitter deck, showing us how exactly the President of the United States of America has made this rather dramatic U-turn in 24 hours. Meanwhile, Srinjoy, you're joining us on the broadcast. Hi, good afternoon to you and welcome to the Afternoon Dispatch. Can you help me understand why the Americans have, I won't call it a U-turn, but have scaled down the level of their threat from saying that there will be a blockade on the entire strait to now just a blockade of Iranian ports?
Yes, what the Americans are thinking is as follows, because their main objective is to stop Iranian exports, primarily oil. Now, what kind of pipelines do Iran have from the Iranian landmass to the rest of the world? That's a smaller part. We know that Kharg Island is the avenue for export of 90% of Iran's oil, crude oil. Now, the choice between America was this: if we keep the Strait of Hormuz open, or we don't take any action vis-a-vis the Strait of Hormuz, the people who will benefit are our allies: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and so on. So the idea is to stop Iranian oil. So if you have to stop Iranian oil, then a blockade on Iranian ports carrying fuel, crude oil from Iran would be the main objective. Otherwise, if it's a complete blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, now that is possible, then what happens is not only is Iran affected, which is the idea, but also several other countries which are your friends and allies. Now, the Straits of Hormuz blockade is not enough, because there are some Iranian island ports which are southeast of the Strait of Hormuz. So if that is so, then just blocking the Strait of Hormuz is not enough. In any case, the Americans have enough ships, enough carriers, enough destroyers to do the needful. But what they've done is blockade or threaten to blockade Iran's ports.
So, Srinjoy, essentially, while a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz effectively shuts down a global energy checkpoint, a blockade of Iranian ports is a targeted military action aimed specifically at Iran's economy, and that really is the difference. So this is a clear scale down, and the scale down has come, Sagarika, within 24 hours.
So, and actually, let's show you the first threat, what Donald Trump said yesterday, and there was a clear mention of the Strait of Hormuz. I'm going to read out his post from yesterday, and this is that exact part where Donald Trump said, we will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At all points, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis. But Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about. So here, once again, giving us, let's tell you about what Donald Trump said yesterday. Yesterday, he declared via Truth Social, effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. Now, let's tell you his latest declaration. In the latest, Donald Trump has now said that we will now ensure that any ships entering the Iran port will be blockaded. So now we are going to put our focus on what Donald Trump has said in the last 24 hours itself, Shreya, from blockading the Strait of Hormuz to now shifting focus to action at Iranian ports. Seems to be a recalibration possibly.
All right, Sagarika, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, let's quickly listen in to President Donald Trump.
Navy is underwater, you know that. 158 ships are gone. Their Navy's gone. Most of their mine droppers are gone. We have a lot of people, as you know, at 10 o'clock tomorrow, we have a blockade going into effect. That'll be 10 o'clock tomorrow. Other nations are working so that Iran will not be able to sell oil. And that will be very effective. But what we want to do is we want to, and again, we don't need it. What we notice and what we see and what I think is maybe my idea, maybe not, I don't know. But there are many boats heading toward our country to fill up with oil and then go and take it. So they're not going to go through the Hormuz Strait.
All right, this is big breaking news coming in. Iran reacting now, issuing a stark warning after the United States of America announced a naval blockade targeting Iranian ports. Now, according to Iran's armed forces, and this is a statement they have put out, and it has been carried out by their state broadcaster, the IRIB, Tehran is saying that security in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman must be for everyone or for no one, warning that if Iranian ports are threatened, no ports in the region will remain safe. Now, this message clearly signaling potential retaliation across regional maritime infrastructure. This warning is coming as the United States of America is preparing to enforce a blockade on all vessels that are entering or leaving Iranian ports, a move that Tehran has already called a violation of the ceasefire and a dangerous escalation. A dangerous escalation it is, but it should have been expected, Mayank, given the fact that the talks have failed. What is the worry as far as we understand what the worry for Iran is? If all their ports there's a blockade on them, it of course cripples Iran's economy. But then this also means that there is a danger for maritime operations, not just in and around Iranian ports, but also the Strait of Hormuz, because we should expect the Iranians to strike back.
Freedom of navigation has always been the bedrock of international laws as far as maritime movement is concerned, and it is, if it happens so and it is blocked, it encompasses the movement all across the globe, and the trade across the globe moves on oceans and seas only. So what you see is actually that, and good that the clarity has come out that only the ships which are transiting towards or coming out of the ports of Iran will be the one which will be blockaded. Having said that, it remains one of the points which is economically hurting the globe and has raised the cost of living for everyone. So it becomes very sensitive in that regard, and Iran has been time and again showing that they were the one who were regulating and controlling the movement of vessels, which remained whether civilian vessels or the merchant vessels from that side. And they have got the ability, they have shown it by firing the kind of missiles and the drone. So it becomes, let us wait for some time that in what form the deployment of the ships and the capital ships from the US will be taking place, and how the Iranians are going to further answer to that. it is going to, we need to wait for that, because that will also decide the future course of the things happening in the Middle East.
Mayank, we leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, talks between the United States and Iran have failed, and the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil choke point, is now on the edge. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned of a naval blockade targeting Iranian shipping, with interception plans and mine-sweeping operations currently underway. In response, we've just heard Iran's Revolutionary Guards have issued a direct warning. Any U.S. military presence near the strait will be treated as a violation and dealt with decisively on the ground. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the fact is the impact is already visible. Tankers are turning back. Some are waiting outside the strait, and others are switching off tracking systems. The global shock is already building. Brent crude prices have surged, as one can imagine, past the $100 a barrel mark. There you are. This is a big worry, not just for the United States, but across the globe as well. As we track the prices, there is also, at least back home in India, some speculation that the prices for petrol, diesel, etc. may increase after the elections. Meanwhile, two oil tankers let's quickly take you through what crude prices have actually looked like. They're on your screens, February 27th. Where is it trading? Where is Brent trading? It is trading at about $72.97 per barrel. This is before the war. March 6th, we come to $92.92 per barrel. This is $92.92 per barrel. Then March 12th, as you progress into the war, this is the first time that you breach the $100 mark. You're coming at $100.46 per barrel. March 20th, as we progress further, prices going further up, 107.53% per barrel. March 26th, again, they dip a bit, $101.96 per barrel. April 2nd, zooms, 109.11 per barrel. April 8th, scales down a bit, $94.78 per barrel. April 13th, again zooms up to $102 per barrel. Meanwhile, more breaking news coming in. There are two oil tankers that are carrying Iranian crude that have arrived off India's coast, marking the very first such deliveries in nearly 7 years. The Iran-flagged tanker Felicity is anchored off the Sikka port in Gujarat, while the Curacao-flagged Jaya is waiting near Paradeep, which is in Odisha. These shipments have come in under a temporary U.S. sanctions waiver that allowed the sale of Iranian oil already on water, aimed at easing global supply pressures and cooling of prices. But the timing is crucial. Even as these tankers arrive, talks between the U.S. and Iran, as you know, have failed, and Washington has now announced a blockade targeting Iranian ports. Let me go across to Rishabh, who is joining us on the broadcast. Rishabh, good news coming in, reason for us to smile here in India, but this could be temporary, right?
Well, Shreya, the way you started, after 7 years, there is an Iranian oil tanker anchorage at Indian port. Reason, back in 2019, it was US that put a secondary sanction on Iranian oil, and India had to reluctantly stop buying Iranian oil. Since then, there hasn't been any oil purchase from Iran by India. Last month, when the war began, there was a leverage that was given to cool down the Brent prices that we were seeing going up and down. To cool down that pricing, there was some leverage given, and Iranian oil that were on water could be purchased. They were removed from the sanction list. India purchased at least 4, is what we are given to understand, 4 VLCC, which is very large oil tankers, and what we are now given to understand that 2 of them have reached, one in Paradeep, one in Sikka in Gujarat. Now, when it was purchased, it was not sanctioned. But when it has reached India, it already is in the sanction list. So the complications, around the Iranian oil and energy market whole continues. There are complications, there are confusion right now in market, and that's the reason that the Trent fuel prices are going up 102 today, and it is expected to go further once this India time evening. You'll have the naval blockade announced by United States. Whether there will be a blockade or not, that's secondary. But even the announcement will, push market into frenzy about the oil pricing, and that is something that we all are right now embracing for, that how things will unfold once we get up tomorrow morning. Over the weekend,
the Iranians, in any case, Rishabh, have already predicted that the Americans will have to start paying more for petrol. We leave it there for the moment. Thanks. Just take a look at this now. A rare ideological clash has erupted between the White House and the Vatican. This came after Pope Leo XIV issued one of his strongest public condemnations of the US war in Iran. Now, what began as a moral appeal for peace has triggered a political counterattack from President Donald Trump, turning faith war and authority into a global flashpoint. In the middle of this confrontation, Trump once again projected an extraordinary personal image of power, portraying himself not just as a political leader, but as a figure of near divine authority. It takes a certain kind of megalomania, honestly, to depict yourself as Jesus Christ. Trump's response goes beyond disagreement on policy. He's directly rejecting the Pope's right to comment on US decisions, defending his own electoral mandate, and questioning the Pope's neutrality, while also accusing him of political bias, foreign policy weakness, and alignment with ideological opponents. President Trump began by rejecting the Pope's criticism outright, saying he does not want a Pope who criticizes the President of the United States, while he is, in his words, doing exactly what I was elected in a landslide to do. Trump alleged that he was selected because he's American. Trump went further, saying, if I wasn't in the White House, Leo won't be in the Vatican. In another line of attack, Trump questioned the Pope's independence and decisions, describing him as weak on crime and weak on nuclear weapons. He also criticized the Pope's meetings with what he called Obama sympathizers.
I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess. He hit us. Think of it. He's worried about fear. What about the fear when the ministers and the priests and all of those great people that were arrested during COVID, and in many cases they're outside 10 feet apart and they were arrested. So we don't like it. We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime. He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon so they can blow up the world. So I'm not a fan of Pope Leo.
Shinjo, you continue to be with us. Pope Leo is the first American-born pope, yes, but he also holds a Peruvian citizenship. President Trump isn't afraid of opening multiple fronts, clearly. I mean, where is the logic in clashing with the Pope? He can have a difference of opinion.
And in the middle of a war, first of all, very rarely is the Pope accused of all these things. The only historical memory people have of attacks on the Pope, and that too was done privately, was when Joseph Stalin asked Winston Churchill how many divisions, and I refer to military divisions, each one of about 20,000 soldiers, how many divisions does the Pope have? Now, the Soviet Union was the largest country geographically in the world. The Vatican was the smallest, yet the Pope had moral authority. Now, that apart, it also must be remembered that roughly a fifth, about 20% of all Americans are Roman Catholic. This is an election year. This is the middle of a war. So what are these 20% of Americans, roughly 60 million people, thinking about their president and what he has to say about their Pope?
Srinjoy, thank you for being with us. All of this is, of course, coming after Pope Leo issued one of his strongest public interventions yet against the ongoing US-Israel war in Iran. He is warning that the world is being driven by what he's called a delusion of omnipresence, addressing, in fact, worshippers during a vigil at St. Peter's Basilica. The Pope urged global leaders to step back from escalation and choose negotiation over force. He said there must be an end to what he described as the display of power and called for war to be replaced by dialogue and restraint. Without directly naming the United States of America's President Donald Trump, the Pope's message was widely seen as pointed critique of Washington's handling of the conflict, especially as military rhetoric has intensified around Iran. And of course, there is a response coming to what President Trump had tweeted out. California's governor has escalated the political clash with President Donald Trump, posting a new provocative image on social media, this time depicting Trump dressed as Satan. The post is coming as a direct counter to Trump's earlier AI-generated image, showing himself in a godlike miracle-performing pose, a visual that had already triggered widespread political debate over the use of religious symbolism in political messaging. And there are many people, honestly, just shaking their heads in shock and awe. There you have it. That's President Trump's God complex, the picture that actually triggered a massive social media conversation. There you have him as Trump the healer, healing I don't know who, and you have military personnel looking up to him and a couple of worshippers praying to him, as well as you see the eagle and the American flag there. Of course, what was tweeted out by many of his critics is President Trump dressed as Satan, and the person he is blessing is Epstein. So that is the kind of social media commentary that is currently ongoing. Meanwhile,